Hello audience. Welcome to Vietnamese Army YouTube channel. In today's program, we would like to send you some key features of the formation of the Vietnam People's Army. On December 22, 1944, the Vietnam Liberation Army propaganda team was established with 34 troops under the direction of President Ho Chi Minh. On May 15, 1945, the Vietnam Liberation Army propaganda team merged with the National Salvation Army and changed its name to Vietnam Liberation Army, becoming the main military force of the Viet Minh Front. General uprising to seize power in the August Revolution of 1945. From 1945 to 1949, the Liberation Army had to fight with a much stronger opponent, the French Colonial Army. But with a reasonable war strategy, the Liberation Army was growing in spite of the continuous French troops. Sweeping, plunging the French into a costly and increasingly exhausted war of attrition. From 1945 to early 1950, the Liberation Army grew from a small army of several thousand men to the Vietnam National Army with a total of about 50,000 men, organized into 40 detachments. By the end of 1950, the Liberation Army won a major victory in the border campaign and switched positions from defense to counterattack. After the border campaign, the border between Vietnam and China was opened. Vietnam began to receive the aid of weapons from the Socialist Bloc, the Soviet Union, China and some Eastern European countries. The army has grown tremendously in both numbers and combat capabilities. In 1950, the Vietnam National Army changed its name to Vietnamese People's Army. After that, the main Army Corps 308, 304, 312, 320, 316, 325, 351 were also established. On May 7, 1954, the Vietnam People's Army established the Dien Phu victory over the French colonialists. By the end of the Indochina War in 1954, the Vietnam People's Army had a total number of about 25,000 main troops and several tens of thousands of local militia. After the Geneva Accords, part of the People's Army in the south gathered to the north. The Vietnamese army began to build its army according to the unified regular system. The Politburo decided to cut 80,000 main troops, put 30,000 troops into the economy, keep only 170,000 main troops, and at the same time set up more branches of the Navy, air defense, and vehicle forces. Increase border guards. On February 15, 1961, the Liberation Army of South Vietnam was established as a part of the People's Army fighting in the South. The Vietnam People's Army waged a war against the U.S. with a strategy called All People, comprehensive and long-term, typically against special wars and local wars of the U.S. in the South. Against the war of sabotage by the U.S. Air Force and Navy in the North, notably the Dien Phu aerial campaign in December 1972. The general offensive of the spring 1975 uprising ended with the Ho Chi Minh campaign on April 30, 1975, liberating the South and reunifying the country. During the period 1961 to 1975, American documents often distinguished two forces, the Liberation Army of South Vietnam, the U.S. called the Viet Cong, and the People's Army of Vietnam, the U.S. called the North Vietnamese Army. Closing parenthesis. But actually, the Liberation Army of South Vietnam was formed from a part of the guerrillas of the People's Army of Vietnam. This distinction of the United States comes from the fact that the National Front for the Liberation of South Vietnam and the Provisional Revolutionary Government of the Republic of South Vietnam legally have independence from the Democratic Republic of Vietnam but are still subject to party leadership of the Vietnam Labor Party, not prohibited by the Geneva Agreement. In order to have a reasonable position at the negotiating table in Paris, After 1975, when it publicized the leadership of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam over the Liberation Front, the Provisional Revolutionary Government and the Liberation Army throughout the war, the Liberation Army was considered a part of the Vietnam People's Army as it was when it was established. Until 1975, the Vietnam People's Army had 1.24 million main troops and millions of local militia, ranking fourth in total number in the world, just behind the Soviet Union, the United States and China. In 1977, Vietnam advocated to reduce the number of main forces to 850,000 people, 600,000 troops are in constant combat. 250,000 troops are involved in economic production. However, when the situation on the southwestern border was complicated, Vietnam was forced to switch economic units to fight and increase the number of troops to over 1 million people. At the same time, more than 50,000 soldiers were sent to Laos to ensure stability in Laos. On December 23, 1978, the Vietnamese army mobilized 250,000 main troops to launch a counterattack against the attack of the Democratic Kampuchea Army, Khmer Rouge. After that, he coordinated with the Cambodian Armed Forces, defeated 21 Democratic Cambodian Army divisions, and abolished the genocidal regime. On February 17, 1979, China brought 600,000 troops to the northern border of Vietnam. The war lasted only 30 days, but then the two sides were tense for 10 years. In 1979-1980, Vietnam had to maintain its main force to over 2 million people. By 1983, it had decreased to 1.6 million people. In 1989, after normalizing relations with China and withdrawing troops from Laos and Cambodia, the Vietnamese army was reduced to about 600,000 men. Currently, the Vietnam People's Army has a standing force of about 450,000 people and a reserve force of about 5 million people. For more latest news about weapons, technology, strength of the Vietnamese People's Army, please support, subscribe and share my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Best regards and see you soon.